Okay, so welcome everyone. And today Namali and I are speaking with Dr. Heather Larkin Holloway, a social work scholar whose work bridges research, community healing, and integral theory. And Heather's focus is on trauma, childhood adversity, and homelessness. And her work involves developing comprehensive responses to these challenges, including Heather's Restorative Integral Support model for trauma recovery, which we'll be hearing more about later. And as an associate professor at the University of Albany, Heather continues to explore how societies can best respond to human suffering with compassion and wisdom. So welcome, Heather. And perhaps you could start by sharing a bit about your origin story. So what drew you into academia, social work, and integral theory?
Well, let's see. I guess I became a social worker pretty quickly in life. So I went straight from my undergraduate degree to get my MSW. And the reason I chose social work, actually, when had been an undergrad, I had been majoring in psychology and finished that up quickly and was really interested in, like there's more than the interior of the person. And so I was interested in other courses that would be more focused on like sociology, cultural anthropology, things like that. And so I developed a second major in women's studies, which was interdisciplinary. And so it kind of gave me that more holistic picture that I was searching for. And then I chose social work over psychology because it had that called person and environment perspective. And then when I practiced social work full time for 7 years, I was a clinical social worker, licensed alcohol drug counselor, working in a rural area and consulting to different organizations from a community mental health center. And I realized that the people who were experiencing the most complex co-occurring issues, different family members might show up in different systems. Like I did hospital consultation, cardiac rehab consultation, nursing home consultations, school consultations while working at a community mental health center. So when I went back to get my PhD, I felt like, well, I want to focus more on this policy administration aspect of social work, kind of considering how could we better serve the people who need it the most. And then, and I also was really, felt like a piece that was missing and all of that was a spiritual understanding of what's going on beyond people's presenting concerns. And so I was just looking for a place to get my PhD where I could kind of focus on those areas a bit more. And that led me to Catholic University of America. My PhD is in policy and administration and social work, but I also, the few clinical oriented classes I took were like spirituality and social work and transpersonal theory and social functioning. And it was in the transpersonal theory and social functioning course with Dr. Elizabeth Smith that I had been introduced to integral theory. And I was like, oh, wow, well, why aren't we using this in social work? I mean, we say we have a person environment perspective, and yet we have all these different theories for clinical versus macro versus policy. Isn't this obvious that we should be just using integral theory? And I really, at that time, I was like kind of confused, like, why aren't we doing that? And I was surprised that, these more senior faculty who were clearly smarter than me and I had a lot to learn from, didn't think that was such an obvious idea or a good idea. And so, but I went to the integral trainings right away. So let's see, I had finished my doctoral coursework in, I guess it was the spring of 2003 and was starting to start writing on my proposal for my dissertation. And then I guess it was in 2004 that I went to the first integral transformative practice conference that I could get to. And then I completed my dissertation almost exactly 20 years ago now. It was December of 2005. And so my official graduation was January 2006, and then I began working at University at Albany in August of 2006. And so I kind of tracked how did I get interested in social work? And I've lost your exact question. So please let me know if I missed any part of your question.
Well, no, I mean, this is perfect. Basically, we were asking about your origin story. So what has been your motivation? What has been your path to get where you are now? And for people watching or listening, it's perhaps also interesting to mention that over the course of your career, you've published, I think, 32 academic articles.
Co-authored, yes.
So yeah, well, which is of course quite impressive, which gives an impression of your scope and the degree to which you're able to transform also theory into practice. That's one of the things we like to focus on.
Yes, yes. Well, if I can add a little to that
Please,
other
please.
response, really. So that was sort of a journey of like realizing, oh, wow, integral theories clearly would be such a useful theory for social work, but of course, other people not necessarily seeing it that way, and trying to kind of figure that out for myself, and also realizing at that point, like by becoming involved in the integral trainings, I realized, oh, like I come at things very cognitively, and I discovered this out of a cognitive interest. But for me personally, my cognition has tried to like take over other functions. So I've really worked since then, like, to kind of get in touch with like, oh, how do I know things in other ways than thinking about them, and kind of really working on, and it has not always been easy, just to sort of like being a more integrated person myself, right? And then simultaneously, I started working at the University at Albany. And I want to say too, when I first went to those integral trainings, I immediately got connected with John Records, who's been such an important mentor to me throughout this whole time. I went out while I was finishing up, when I finished up my dissertation, and when my dissertation was being reviewed, I had gone out to study the Committee on the Shelterless as like a real world example of what does it look like to have a more integrally informed organization, and to learn from John Records, and kind of address my own spiritual development and awareness beyond my cognition and things like that. And so at the time, right after I finished my dissertation, and I wasn't 100% sure that I wanted to go into a faculty position, John Records had also introduced me to the adverse childhood experiences research by Vincent Fleety and Rob Anda, two medical doctors, one with Kaiser Permanente and one with the Centers for Disease Control at the time.
Yeah, Heather,
So,
before
yes.
you continue, could you explain to everyone what this adverse childhood experiences framework is, please?
Sure, yes. Well, interestingly, the adverse childhood experiences work that was coming out of the medical field showed that these medical doctors were recognizing that, there had been some appreciation before that health risk behaviors contribute to health challenges. And they were starting to realize that these earlier life accumulated adversities were related to health risk behaviors, and that it was that these, what we were calling health risk behaviors, they were recognizing were probably personal coping strategies, and that so they had short-term benefits of helping people feel better, and longer-term health consequences. And what the ACE researchers had done was they created an ACE score looking at categories of adversity earlier in life, not numbers of experiences, but categories of different types of abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. And then based on the number of categories you have, you get an ACE score ranging from 0 to 10. And people who had ACE scores of 4 and higher were more likely to be experiencing multiple and co-occurring health challenges. And what I realized as a social worker is that these medical doctors were recognizing the role that adversity was playing in health. And as social workers, we have developed a lot of expertise over time, from clinical to policy and macro, different types of interventions to prevent and intervene to help people to overcome adversity and advance resilience and policy equity and things that help to alleviate adversities while building resilience. And I've thought, gosh, we don't call what we do ACE response, preventing and intervening with adverse childhood experiences. But if you look at all of social work, everything we do is relevant to ACE response. And I felt like interestingly, this research that was coming out of the medical field was theoretical, and it was really called for a more integral perspective on it, right? And so it seemed, and John Records had introduced me to it, and we had conversations about that and how, and what was going on. What he was seeing at the time, leading a homeless services agency, was that they were sort of like a de facto trauma ward and wasn't recognized as such, and sort of figuring out how to pull the necessary services and supports together for people to be able to keep moving forward in their lives. And for me, it was useful with John Rickard's support to be able to find my way in a university setting where there wasn't much interest in integral theory, or, if people had heard of Ken Wilber's work, sometimes I get it like an eye roll or something. So I thought, okay, so this is what I've got the ACE research, which sort of serves an integrating function. And it relates in some way to everything all of my colleagues are working on. So it gives me a sort of a way to collaborate. And also, if people were to say, well, hey, what about this? In terms of, adverse childhood experiences, but what about resilience? What about adverse adult experiences? What about oppression? I would say, yes, you're right. And so it gave me an opportunity to engage with different people and collaborate. And yeah, so that's sort of what the ACE research is, like in a quick nutshell. And then the role it played in me kind of finding my way in an academic setting, where my interest was more theory and advancing holistic approaches, whole systems, whole community, whole person ways of doing things, when we're still working in a setting that has tended to kind of break things up into categories. So different theories addressing different consequences of adversity and trauma in different ways, or addressing building resilience and policy equity in different ways. And so it gave me a route to sort of pull it all together, with a special emphasis on people experiencing homelessness, because that was a vulnerable population that was actually, we actually find that homeless services agencies are less resourced than some other social service agencies, less likely in many cases to have an MSW there. And the people who are experiencing homelessness are more likely to have these high ACE scores and multiple co-occurring challenges that actually put them in a more difficult position to navigate a fragmented service delivery system. So my whole approach has been just trying to figure out how to use that research to develop more connections, collaborations, and move towards a more, how could we consider a more holistic architecture, say, for social services delivery.
Yeah, wonderful. So just for my understanding, MSW is a medical social worker, is that
Oh, I'm
correct?
sorry, Masters of Social Work.
Oh, master's.
And so medical social work, some people do medical social work, but social workers do so many things. And the degree, it's interesting. We actually require a lot of foundation coursework, and more credits than the average master's program. And also field placements. Our students are in field placements as well. So it's actually a very intensive degree that you can do a lot with. And medical social work would be like one of those categories I was sort of referring to. Like, we tend to break off into like, oh, my focus is child welfare or children and families or medical social work or homelessness, as if it's separate from all these other things. Or I do policy analysis, or I do community organizing. And so there's different theories and different ways of methodologies of doing research, revealing different types of data that people have expertise in around these different substantive areas.
It's amazing, Heather, just to listen to the wide variety of goodness in the world that I think you've been engaged in and in creating and contributing. That makes me wonder. I always get curious about a calling that maybe all of us have at some point. We've talked in this series of calls that we've done. We've also talked with two other physicians,
Yes.
Dr. James Duffy and Dr. Edward Barron Short. They were both just incredible conversations as well. And now here we are with you again, also in this field of helping humans, helping culture and society grow and evolve, mainly through kind of where we also suffer. So I'm just curious to hear from you. At which point did the human condition become a point of reflection for you, so much so that you would go on to build this incredible body of work?
Thanks, Namali. That's a really good question. I was born right after my father came back from Vietnam. I was born on a Marine base, Camp Lejeune. And so he had had a lot of trauma in Vietnam. And my mother was very like a very solution focused kind of a person. She was a librarian. She ultimately became a librarian, not immediately. They were both young when I was born. So I think and my dad he was from an Irish Catholic background. His parents had come from Ireland. And he really valued like getting along well with others, being friendly, no matter what he had been through. That his most important thing was that he wanted to, like be a friendly person and just keep moving forward. And so I think I learned growing up that it was important to do well in school and think of solutions and get along well with people, like from an early age. And so I don't think I realized those things growing up, but I think as I was growing up, I knew those were the most important things. Like, it wasn't until I got to into my undergrad and I was taking all these psychology courses and that I was like, something's not covered here. Like, this is too limited. And so then did the women's studies degree because it gave me that interdisciplinary and cultural and social systems kind of addition to it. So, and to tell you the truth, I all I really wanted to do in life was get married and have 4 kids. So not, and the reason I went back to get my PhD was because I hadn't gotten married yet and had kids, and I wanted to just like find some next thing to do that seemed like, oh, I don't want to do. I've done 7 years full time, clinical work in a community mental health setting here, and let me see if I can do something more that would involve address the systems issues and better serve people. And so, yeah, I just kind of kept going in that direction, and and honestly, if I had been fortunate enough to have gotten married and pregnant when I was on the tenure track, I don't think I would be here talking with you about this today, because I don't think I would have been able to navigate the university system while having children. What happened for me was that I did all of this, all the work that I needed, everything to get tenure. And as soon as I got tenure, I just really wanted to, I was like, okay, now I need to get married and have children. And it's running late. And so that became my priority after that. And I continued to be productive and all that. But I can tell you that the university system, the way that the institution is an archaic design that became very bureaucratized over time. And I think people have tried to make adaptations to, adjust to the fact that we have a more diverse workforce today, but the initial system design wasn't made for it. And I found it challenging even as a tenured faculty person, now that I have 2 young children. And I had some challenges having those children later in life too. That's why at this point I've decided to leave the university system. This is my last semester. I'll continue to do scholarly work, but I'll actually have more flexibility, I think, outside of the university system. That I found it to be the system have become trauma inducing, and that undermines an ability to advance trauma informed social work. So I'll just stop there with that one.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. You're in the midst of themes of trauma and homelessness, and it's a world of vulnerability into which you have come in, and you've been there for a long time now. In that world of doing a lot of policy work that would impact a world of suffering in some ways that really directly impacts the human condition, what was it about? What was sort of unique about integral theory that caught your eye at that time, that made you feel like you wanted to attend all these conferences and then do all the publications that you have co-authored or authored using integral theory? What was it uniquely about integral theory or big picture thinking, integrative thinking, that got you going?
Well, let's see. I mean, in fact, the first time that I wrote a paper applying integral theory to, I was actually writing a paper for one of my last doctoral courses on management. And I was, because it was policy administration, it was an administration course. And thought, oh, I was so interested from my transpersonal theory and social functioning course to have learned integral theory. Let me apply Ken Wilber's integral theory to this paper I'm writing about management with, research questions about management. So I was applying integral theory to this paper, which ended up becoming Integral Management in the Effective Human Services Organization, which was published. But in writing that paper, the process of applying integral theory, it gave me like a spiritual experience, like a new view in the world. So it was, I think maybe Ken Wilber has talked about it being psychoactive, right? Application. So for me personally, I experienced that. And I was like, wow, this is great. Like maybe I just need to keep writing about integral theory and I'll like feel totally, free and liberated. And of course, then by going to the integral conferences, like open up this whole new world of like, oh, wow, actually, I've been trying to do a lot with my cognition, that my cognition was not, it doesn't have to take over all these functions. Maybe I need to like address all these other lines of development and, engage in some spiritual practices and explore that more. And that was the start of it. Really was like, I was like, oh, this is like obviously, a theory that would do everything we need to do, from my view. Like it's got all it has a place for all the theories we already use. It would provide a way to integrate what we call like clinical and macro policy social work, kind of as if they're separate tracks. I was like, wow, that's so great. And then I like apply it in my writing and I'm like, wow, it's really so great. I'm like in this new world now, like a really, really spiritual experience. And then I went to integral conferences and, met these people who were like so impressive and so much more developed than me. And honestly, it was a little like confusing too. It was like, well, here I am at Catholic University and how come none of my professors are, like enlightened or from my perspective, so I was like, I want to learn from these people. And then meanwhile, like trying to navigate university setting where like, if anybody had heard of Ken Wilber at that time, most people did not, like in the academic setting, weren't really taking that seriously. So that was a little challenging for me.
What had you take that risk though? Because I mean, still, this is such a nascent field, like this integral theory stuff and integral practice. In the academic world, I would say it's still not really regarded as a valid body of work.
Right.
So, what had you take such a risk almost in your academic career to do so much publishing and policy work using integral theory?
Well, that's a great question. And very honestly, maybe it was less of a risk for me because for the one thing, I had John Record's support. And like I felt like I have this really powerful, he wasn't in academia, but
It's John Records, by the way.
oh, John Records, he was the director of the Committee on the Shelterless out in Petaluma, California, who had gotten connected with when I went to the first Integral Theory conference. He's a very realized and supportive, benevolent, wonderful being. And I was so fortunate to like have his support. And then, so there was that aspect. And then, maybe it was less of a risk for me too, because my priority was not, I did not have the plan that I was going to be a professor someday. I really wanted to get married and have 4 children. And life just worked it out that I didn't find my husband till the minute I turned in my tenure materials. So maybe that helped too. Like, and I'm very responsible. And so I did everything I needed to do. And also, like, at one point, I thought of leaving the tenure track anyway when I was there, but it was like right after the 2008 economic crisis and everything, and I I would have had to find another job, and I wasn't able to. I actually put my condo for sale at that time, so I just kept doing everything that tenure required, which probably prevented me from finding my husband. But I did all that, and then so I got tenure.
Nice. Yes, so let's go from theory to practice, if you will, Heather.
Sure.
And let's say for those 3 areas of policy and resilience and trauma, can you give a concrete example of where your work has been influential on a particular outcome that you've seen?
It's a hard question for me right now because in some ways, I feel like, well, I did my best in academia. This is my last semester, and I wasn't able to influence the university system in terms of trying to influence policies and policies administration there to actually be a healthier place for me and my colleagues to work. Very honestly, I'm kind of in a feeling of a little bit of failure right now, and some of the things I had started working on, I mean, I don't think I'm a failure, but I just realized I needed to leave trying to work in that system. And when I first started at the university at Albany, I immediately did a couple of things. I developed a proposal to look at adverse childhood experiences, history, and service use backgrounds of people who are experiencing homelessness, both in California and New York. Developed a bi-coastal relationship with the Committee on the Shelterless and my work in New York, and then also started ACE think tank and action team meetings in the capital region of New York right away, it was really amazing because and I had connected with Vincent Felitti, thanks to John Records, who had connected with Vincent Felitti and then connected us. I had Vincent Felitti out, started these ACE think tank and action team meetings just to like get a sense from program directors, leaders of social services in the community, and anybody at the university who wanted to come, and policymakers, et cetera, whoever was like open. And we had them in different places at the university and also in some of the government office buildings and stuff. And so, and Vincent Felitti was out for at least one of them. Later on, Robbie Enda, these are the ACE researchers, had come out. And they were very well attended by, program directors, alumni, some policymakers. Immediately, people were saying, this is really important to us because the work that we do in social services, this shows that it's connected to health, that, that we're actually, preventing and addressing the consequences of accumulated adversity in people's lives. So either preventing ACEs in the first place or preventing the consequences by intervening effectively when, people have had high ACE scores. And so breaking that trajectory from accumulated adversity and trauma to later in life health challenges. And so right away, there was this interest like, okay, so let's do more together, how we can raise awareness of this. And that led to a few things. I mean, one is we got together at that time, so these started in 2007. The homelessness research proposal was approved, and the ACE think tank's action team meeting started in 2007. And so we developed an early website just for sharing presentations so that different people could do presentations on the ACEs and stuff, and share different examples of how people sort of learning, how are people developing more ACE informed programs, how are people coordinating more across systems around these shared interests of maybe before we said we're community mental health and we're residential treatment for children or we're substance abuse, but now we're all talking about the same thing. So how can we talk about, we're addressing preventing adverse childhood experiences and their consequences, things like that. So there was a lot of sharing of information, started doing trainings. So I started doing a lot of presentations and webinars around adverse childhood experiences and around responding to adverse childhood experiences, where I was able to introduce an integral framework for understanding ACEs and ACE response. And through that avenue, that was rewarding for me, I guess you'd say, because people were interested, people who were interested in ACEs, then they were getting oh yeah, that's helpful. The quadrants, help us to kind of see this, and it could derail development in different ways, but at the same time, people have many strengths and areas where we can support their resilience and help get development back on track, and we can come at it from these different dimensions, quadrant perspectives. So I loved that because I kind of used the ACE research as a way to bring in integral theory. And so along those lines, when I look back, I feel that was what I was doing, was sort of finding a route to kind of plant an integral perspective within an academic research university. So yeah, so I feel good about that. I think through all those articles I wrote, even though I couldn't start out being here's integral theory and what integral theory says about it, I could be integrally informed and point it out in different ways and cite people for that I knew were doing great work in the integral community. And I put it in the discussion and implications of research articles for, this starts to call for a more holistic perspective or a whole systems, whole community, whole person perspective, things like that. So yeah, I feel really good about that. And I also, so those ACE think tank and action team meetings, they evolved into the Hearts Initiative. A number of the key program directors who were really involved with the ACE think tank and action team meetings worked with me to get local funding from the Charles R. Wood Foundation in the capital region. Normally they funded things like, a wing on a library or things like that. So we kind of made the case of like, well, we're building a website back then. Like this is a physical structure, and we're calling it Hearts for Healthy Environments and Relationships that Support, responding to ACEs. And they had something on their funding that said, we do what we can for society, but it must come from the heart. And also with the social work emphasis being more on like, how do you build those healthy environments and supportive relationships, we decided to call ourselves the Hearts Initiative. And then we were able to talk about, like, what are some things we need to support around self-care for leaders and for practitioners in these agencies, so that they're able to lead the development of Hearts, and kind of talk about it a little bit that way. And again, introducing the integral perspective on that. Then the Health Federation of Philadelphia was really interested in identifying. They got funding from Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the California Endowment. They were really interested in seeing how can we mobilize action for resilient communities. So they were identifying communities that already had networks in place around addressing ACEs and building resilience. And so we were identified by the Health Federation of Philadelphia as one of these 11 communities nationally. So you can look at their website, markfederation.org, I think it is. They still have it up. And they showed what was going on in the different communities. And they supported us from like around 20, we got the funding maybe the end of 2015 or so, till through 2018. And that helped us to like build more networks, raise more awareness, do more in the communities, developing peer supports in neighborhoods around addressing ACEs, reaching more policymakers, things like that. So the Hearts Initiative and our participation in this national Robert Wood Johnson Foundation funded project for mobilizing action for resilient communities, that was a big development. And also simultaneously around the same time, I was developing more connections across universities for addressing homelessness and bringing together researchers and scholars around how can we develop more of a knowledge base around homelessness and connect it more with what everybody's doing already in social work, how it relates to homelessness, so that we could create more paths for MSW leadership paths into the field of homelessness. We received funding from the New York Community Trust with a partnership from the Council on Social Work Education. They helped us to set up like hot topic presentations that would engage large numbers of people at the conferences, Council on Social Work Education conferences. And a number of schools were involved across the country, partners, and we would try to figure out how to coordinate more and do more research together. And I'll tell you, like, it became challenging. I had my daughter was born early in 2016. I had my daughter when I was 45, and she was born at 3 pounds. And so, and then I wasn't done. I have a son. I have a son too. So I now have a 9-year-old daughter and a 4.5-year-old son. Yeah, just trying my best to navigate all of that. Had my son during the pandemic, and some of the university challenges that were presented along the way made it so that I realized I needed to set some of those things aside and just prioritize my family's health and wellness, and see, like I said, what will emerge next as a way to continue to build some of these more holistic responses.
Yeah. So it sounds as if your main work has been evolving the field, basically, through framing and theoretical underpinnings.
Around academic institutions and bureaucracies, we can all feel like a failure, I think. Oh my goodness. But my God, I hope you remember all the stuff that you have accomplished and done. And
Thank you. And I know if you talk with practitioners that I've worked with and program directors, like I would always say, these are like the real people who are like on the ground in the community. And I used to be there a long time ago, and I've stayed very connected to what was going on in the community. But they're the ones who can give you the examples, and they're still, they don't need me anymore. Some of these agencies that really got the ACE research and then pursued different kinds of trauma trainings and figured out how to, work it into their organization. And some of them are now leading like big ACE awareness conference symposiums and stuff.
I don't know if you already touched on what you call the RIS, the Restorative Integral Support.
Yes.
It seems to be something that weaves together kind of healing and systems change and personal development. I'm curious what inspired the restorative aspect of RIS, and how does it connect to Integral's deeper commitments to what you've been calling whole person and whole communities.
And whole systems, yeah. I co-developed the Restorative Integral Support model with John Records. And part of it was that, what we're working on is an application of integral theory to addressing accumulated adversity and trauma in ways that build resilience and recovery. So it's restorative, like it's sort of focusing on that in that group of people who have had these higher adversities. And helping you and applying integral theory in a way where we can make the best use of resources on the ground that can look different in different places to help restore people's lives to move forward. So that's really was it. I think very honestly at the time I was like, I would feel like I want to just say that's integral theory, but it was a specific application of integral theory to people with high ACE scores, most vulnerable populations, and we were finding people experiencing homelessness having higher ACE scores. So it was an application of integral theory, and so sort of the next step down after theory is like a model. So then it's like sort of it's a multi-dimensional, multimodal model that helps to bring together these specific approaches, interventions, prevention strategies, et cetera, around adversity and trauma in ways that build resilience and recovery. So that's where it came from, and that's why it's restorative. And we didn't call it integral restorative support because that would have been like IRS and RIS, restorative integral support, and is and also lends itself to like rising out of trauma, right? And one of the things I'm really interested in now is like, a big part of this for this to be able to take root, in communities and organizations and stuff is that people need to be able to feel empowered. Like we really need to figure out with our systems, like how do we not only get good leaders with good capacity into what we might call administrative or management or leadership positions. How do we get like really good leaders there? But then also, how do we help to figure out how to intervene with systems design? Like so many of our institutions and systems were created a long time ago, and it's like working inside of an outdated operating system. Like, if your computer was not updated with the latest operating system or something, like we were in like some really old operating systems, and the university being an example. So I feel like there's another piece where maybe we could, do more with that, like, offer some guidance around how do we intervene with systems? And I went for training in holacracy. That's a great example of like being able to create a more an organization that's more poised for ongoing evolution and able to be more agile and not just stuck in the past. And I've seen at the university, for example, like the 1985 policy is more important than how it's affecting a person today, for example. So like that's just silly, and it just people feel disempowered when the policies become just continuing to perpetuate some of these old operations becomes more important than the well-being of the people who are actually trying to do good within the systems. So I think there's some important pieces there. So could maybe expand to like being like RISE, with an E for empowerment or something on the end as a thought. Yeah.
Heather, you've dedicated a lot of energy, time, and your work towards homelessness and trauma and human resilience and all of those kinds of worlds. But you've also published on integral management and effective human service organization. So you also teach about integral management and leadership, and just kind of tying on to your bringing up leadership in your response just a couple seconds ago. We are in, I don't want to say troubled times, because I think every generation goes through some kind of something that feels like mind-blowing to them. But here we are in the age of AI, and the implications of what that would mean moving forward for humanity. There's what we call the meta crisis, the meaning crisis in the kind of the upper left quadrant, so to say. Lots of mental health issues, that behavioral issues that are in the upper right, the climate, and lots of complicated hyperobject issues in the lower right, and culture wars and stuff in the lower left. I'm curious, and by the way, I'd just like to say to others on the call, if you have any questions, we'll open it up right after Heather responds to this question that I'm opening up. So we'd love to hear from everyone else as well. But I'm curious, Heather, who is an integral leader to you today? Like, how would you describe a good leader today that that we would understand as an integral leader?
Well, the people I most admire, I think, are like beyond integral leader, like John Records, for example. He was he is, but I'm thinking back to when he was like running a homeless service organization, like what it's like to see somebody like that running a homeless services organization, just extremely aware and able to set a really powerful tone and an example that builds a culture around him, role modeling behaviors of not just healthy behaviors and good self-care behaviors, but like behaviors of spiritual development, growth and development. The work, you clearly can see the results of his many years of meditation, for example, and but doing it all in a practical, on the ground, serviceful, powerful way. And he really had an ability to, I think, just know what was needed next and somehow help facilitate that next thing coming in. Other integral leaders. I just came back from, oh, sorry.
By the way, I just wanted to clarify. When I said who is an integral leader, I didn't necessarily mean sort of by names, but what are the qualities that that leaders should have, in your opinion, in order to practice integral leadership and management?
Yeah. Well, okay. So just in terms of practicing integral leadership and management, I think that it can help to have a really good map, like, an integral map. What I see a lot in social work is people who have some clinical skills and have learned some things in their mind, kind of finding their way into leadership. And some of them are able to translate their capacity with clinical skills into being a pretty effective manager, but they don't really have a map that also includes themselves and the people that they're supporting in delivering the clinical and social services, or that pulls in together all the policy and organizational things as well. So I think having a map can be really helpful. But aside from that, I think just being able to be paying attention to aware of the data that is emerging around you, like people who are very grounded, have their feet on the ground, and are able to like tune in and learn, having a mindset of like constant learning, and figure out what data is being generated in their immediate experience, to then apply that to something new emerging that's going to advance the mission of the organization. So I would say those are like key things. I mean, I think the fact that in social work, for example, we have different theories that people use for clinical versus macro versus policy, I think is a real problem, because we tend to have a lot more people going into clinical, and they learn more of those clinical theories. Then when people go into a management position, nobody's saying, here's your new theory that actually can guide how you can carry out this management position. Or we have people who maybe major in macro who don't get as much of the clinical theories, and maybe they get into some of those positions of addressing policy or running an organization, but they haven't had the same clinical experiences as the people who have been practicing on the ground, on the front lines for so long too. So I really feel like, this is one of the things that's so beautiful about integral theory is it's like the map that's relevant for all. And yeah, you might fill in some details with some more nuances from different perspectives and stuff. And you want to combine that with the generating data on the ground, right? And being aware and having a learning approach to life. Yeah, so I think, I think that's it. Those are the things is like, you've got to have a good map, but maybe not everybody's as much of a map person as me, but like pay attention to the data that's arising, in your experience and in your relationships, be able to be a constant learner and support other people and being their best, right? Like, so it has to not be about you or about the old policy that you think you have to carry out now or something. Like you need to be prepared, especially in this time. It's like so much is changing around us. We've got to be like poised for constant shifting and development. I think it can be a great developmental opportunity for somebody with the right supports. But if sometimes people are put into administrative positions and not supported at all in developing leadership skills or even management 101, and it can become a disaster.
Yeah.
And really
Very
hurt
true.
people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing that came up for me, Heather, was integral seems in some ways for some people just pretty abstract. How do you embody that, and how do you embody it in your own life?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. And honestly, that's something that I've really been working on because, like I described, I came at this all in a very cognitive way. And I was like, wow, look at these people I'm meeting around me. So right away, I initially was initiated into Kriya Yoga because that's what John Rickards had done for so long. Then I learned about waking down in mutuality, a very embodied consciousness. And so I got
Daniel
involved with,
Daniel and
yes,
Linda Bonder's
yes,
work.
Daniel and Linda Bonder. So, which some teachers are now doing is Trillium Awakening, and I've had some contact with them still. But at the time I started, it was Waking Down in Mutuality, and I know Daniel and Linda have continued to build Waking Down in Mutuality. And I also, during that time, I was trained in integrative restoration with Richard Miller, yoga nidra practice. I did the level 1 and level 2 IREST trainings. I've done IREST pretty regularly. So waking down was like my main thing for a while. I felt like that was really important to me in terms of like kind of being more in my body. And then when I got married and was having kids, the iRest felt more accessible to me to just kind of fit in when I could. Then after the pandemic was over, I joined the Love in Action Sangha, and I also have done like regularly, a lot of therapy in my life. But since learning integral theory, got more involved with like somatic experiencing and EFT, the tapping on acupressure points. So currently I do the Love in Action Sangha twice a month. I participate in those, do the One Heart practice. I'm actually currently been meditating recently more than an hour a day, but usually about an hour a day. And so I do those practices and I continue. So I said somatic experiencing, acupressure tapping, the One Heart practice with the Love in Action Sangha. I still do the iRest practice daily, and I joined the Timeless Wisdom training once I had navigated my phased retirement from the university. And so now I also have the structure of the Timeless Wisdom training support where I have once a month mentor group meetings, weekly triad group meetings. Every morning I tune into a meditation group with the Timeless Wisdom training people. And then I usually do my iRest after that. And at night I do my One Heart practice and my meditation. I do my best. I always got something that I'm kind of working in to like integrate myself more and be as embodied as I can.
Nice. So indeed, Tim, please.
Yes. So this may be sort of a trivial question, but it's not trivial to me. How does one introduce integral to another person. So I'm thinking of peer support. I'm familiar with peer support. So there's that, and I'm a member, so I'm not a staff. So now people are familiar with Maslow's hierarchies of needs,
Yes.
but people are pretty clear about the concrete first 4 levels or so forth. And actually, when you get to self-actualization, most of the people are not there in this peer support situation, right? Including the staff, by the way, because it's very frontline. It seems to me for people to really look at integral, even to be curious, they have to be at that stage where they're probably looking at self-actualization, something broader to look holistically rather than concretely. And you would think, well, there'd be so much benefit if there was this larger picture, right?
Yeah.
Does that happen?
Well, it's such a great question. I mean, I think what I've found is that when people are not at that, they're not at that level of awareness to see and appreciate that bigger picture. They're not going to see and appreciate that bigger picture. They need to be supported in doing what they're doing. And maybe, if you're a friend, a mentor, you have, or, colleague you have in mind, you can sort of see where that would go. And maybe you offer the appropriate supports. I mean, I found that a lot of people have different types of adversity and trauma in their backgrounds, and that people are very resilient. And so that's sometimes a way to kind of, if somebody's got adversity, look at how can I support this person in getting some more supports in place, and maybe maybe that more somatic kind of experience supports, or body-oriented acupressure tapping supports, in addition to like meditating and having a good friend to bounce things off of, and before you know it, then things come together a little bit more, and then maybe they get to a place where they see it. I think a lot of the program directors, people who are educated in social work, that if you introduce it as a way of, maybe even just in an integrally informed way of like bringing the pieces together for more holistic supports for people who need it, that's a route. You look like you've got a thought. I'd love to hear.
The two phrases that I've been able to put in is to say to each person that everybody has a leadership role in their life. So that
Yes.
kind of reframes it, people's responsibility to their life, but without saying burdensome of having responsibility, but that they have to be empowered. But empowerment is so used. So I said, well, leadership. Well, everybody has a role in their life as a leader. The other thing I've tried to say to people is that to learn anything is to go as slow as necessary.
Yes.
Now it's actually the same thing I say to go as fast as possible, because actually Einstein did his thing as slow as necessary, necessary to get to whatever he did, right? So everybody's actually learning as slow as necessary in order to learn, like whatever the speed it is, right? But so I thought for people, rather to reach high, to get the foundation. And so that's to learn as slow as necessary. So those are the two phrases that I found useful.
Yes.
To give people kind of a subtle encouragement, without being overhyped, without this toxic positivity, without overlaying the overlay of the map.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
for a lot of people, the map is scary because, oh my gosh.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
And also, to the extent that people are working in organizations, wouldn't it be nice if our organizations realized, like the administrators, the leadership in our organizations realized that if we created an architecture and policies and procedures that actually valued people's growth and development and supported people in whatever self-care worked for them, recognizing that that's going to play a role in their productivity, and support people in evaluating the helpfulness of their self-care and it's the degree to which it's raising their awareness, that would be pretty powerful too. It occurs to me. So yeah, and I like what you're saying. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Hi, Heather. Thanks so much for sharing your experience and what you did, because I'm working in the field of substance use.
Yes.
And I've always kind of struggled in combining the integral framework with the work I do. I mean,
Yes.
there's integral recovery from John Dupuy, but it's always been hard for me to make something kind of theoretical, model-wise,
Yes.
real in practice. So it's great to hear about your RIS kind of approach. So you inspired me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I wish that it's one thing to introduce RIS as, and support other people in implementing it. But then like when you're working within a system and organization yourself, like my experience has been, I feel like, wow, I wish I wish it were valued like here, the university, like wouldn't that be great to try out and be able to support people?
Yes.
And I appreciate, like, it's validating to me that you appreciate it, because I feel like, gosh, here I am leaving the university. They don't even, I worked there for almost 20 years. They don't even appreciate it. I mean, I think my colleagues in social work are very supportive and appreciate me and what I've offered. And yet everybody's so busy and under so much pressure, and that moves so fast. I think somebody said something that things move so fast, and we kind of need to be able to slow down and reflect on things and notice the data that's arising in our awareness, and take each step at a time. And I think that's an important part of it. And at a certain point, if I don't know if you're working within an organization yourself or not, but if our organizations are undermining what we're trying to offer, at a certain point, we just have to move on. Like, I used to think that I could influence how the university operations from being in there and like just having a reasonable suggestion. And if it's not valued, it's not valued. And maybe some of our old systems, instead of being transformed, maybe they're going to break down and something new can emerge. But I think that's important, like really paying attention to, like, how do we start with ourselves, right? Like, and it becomes very hard to figure out, like, how do I keep supporting other people in being able to implement this in some other setting when if I'm not being adequately supported, or it's not valued in the setting that I'm in. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So, of course, shadow is one of the aspects of integral life practice. And
Yes.
so we were wondering, what's your perception of shadow within the field of social work? Because, of course, there's always the challenge of the rescuer complex. And so what are your perspectives on the main shadow challenges for the field of social work in general?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, I think I know a lot of people come into social work because they've had their own adversities in life, and they've learned to help, how to pay attention to everything going around them, and helping in their environment is a way of helping themselves too. And so I think we need to pay much more attention to that as a field of, like, we have people coming in wanting to do good because they've been through a lot themselves, and how do we adequately support these people and help? Maybe many have a lot of resilience because of that, and have been through healing and want to give back. And some people might also still be hurting, or might be more vulnerable to vicarious traumatization or burnout, or maybe less vulnerable and maybe have some resilience abilities to share through peer supports more. But how could we do more as a profession to support the people coming into it, to say, wow, like, look what you're willing and wanting to commit your life to. Like, how can we help you to do this? I think that's really important. So yeah, in terms of shadow, like, I always remind myself, I'm not separate from everything going on around me. So, if something's feeling like really uncomfortable arising in my environment, or somebody's acting in a way, like policies or leadership are seeming harmful or whatever, I really just do my best to consider, what do I need to do to best respond to the situation? What capacity do I need to build to myself? Maybe I need to add in some more supports for myself. Maybe I need to do a forgiveness practice or something, around a situation that's arising. Yeah, so I think what we need to draw on our resources and supports to help turn any challenge into something that can be transformative and supporting of our growth. And for example, what I've done, as soon as I signed that phased retirement agreement, then I signed up for the Timeless Wisdom training with Thomas Hubel, the 2-year program. And so I'm doing that in conjunction with my work with John Records and so, yeah, so just making sure, like, if we're not getting the supports we need in the context that we're operating in, then maybe we need to find them someplace else, and maybe we need to shift to someplace else too. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. And you mentioned vicarious traumatization. Is that being traumatized by witnessing another person being traumatized?
Or hearing. I mean, as social workers hear a lot of, so we've got a lot of people who we know have a lot of diversity in their background coming into the fields, and then you are listening to clients and people you're serving in all kinds of situations, often telling you and needing your help to solve and resolve painful, traumatic situations that are difficult to hear about. And so you can get traumatized, experience trauma from that. And, if people have higher ACE scores, on the one hand, if they've gotten adequate support, they might have more resilience and capacity to handle that and support people. On the other hand, there could be something triggered off that then touches into somebody's own trauma and reactivity, and it can, if it's not adequately supported within the setting, right, to turn it into something integrative and learning from, that you're able to heal and integrate and learn from, there could be other harms that are created from that. Yeah, does that answer your?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And so I think as we sort of come to a close, if we zoom out, then from my perspective, at least, what you've been doing is creating a body of work that translates some of the benefits of an integral perspective for the field of social work. And even if it's not immediately paying off in perhaps the way that you would have liked as somebody in the field, I think because you've created the work and it remains accessible, that it could very well be in the future that it is much more implemented than it is now, given the continuing development of society and culture.
Yes, and I'm using myself in, my interactions, the things I've raised about policies, administration concerns, and my decision to leave. I'm using myself in another way to influence the system. There's a consequence.
I congratulate you. I wish I had this stuff when I was, my children were 9 and 4. I thank God every day for my wife, because she gave up a great career and then filled her lives with her children, but also with volunteer work. And of course, I went through some burnout, but I have to congratulate you, because at 9 and 4.5, what are those stages that they're at that you are, and it's a noble endeavor what you've done, because, academia it's a mess, isn't it? What you've done is a noble endeavor. What you're going to do is a noble endeavor. And you apologized. I counted at least 3 times, and I didn't catch all of the call. And I congratulate you. You're a champion, And so I just want you to just keep going up and doing some good. Hey, maybe it's one person at a time, I wish I had an integral life when my children were being raised, because I made a lot of mistakes with the first one, and he taught me how to help my second and third children. And that's my experience. It's not right or wrong, but thank God for my wife, because we were both working 70 hours a week, and I continue to do that into my late 50s. And it's no way to live when you can't do the things that you're actually most, in my opinion, most responsible for. So your next endeavor, go do some good. That's all I can tell you. But please, the apologetic manners just broke my heart.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is probably a great place to stop. And thanks everyone for being on the call. And Heather, many thanks to you for sharing your journey and your perspectives and your work.
Yeah.
Well, it's such an honor to have this chance to talk with you all. I really appreciate that you reached out to me, and I'm so happy to do this and look forward to whatever next time I get to see you or talk with you again.
Yeah,
Likewise.
thank you, Heather. Thank you so much. Like Jim said, and like Lee and I both felt, when you just look at the body of work that you have created and continue to create, much gratitude. We're so grateful for what you're doing. And from an integral perspective, Dr. James Duffy, who has done similar kinds of work and is sort of in semi-retirement at this point, when he was leaving one of the hospitals that he worked in, he felt like he did nothing or he accomplished nothing. And one of his colleagues said, are you kidding me? Like, you kept the conversation going. And that has always stayed with me. And Lee and I have talked about it also. We're kind of in this world of integral development and self-development, and these things are never going to become very fashionable out in the sort of the conventional world of academia and organizational development and all of that. But I think each one of us can just keep the conversation going. And in time, like Lee said earlier, I think the time is the future. It's not here yet.
Yes.
I think what you've created and what each of us on this call have created and continue to create, as we keep the conversations going, we will see the fruits of it later. I think, emergence is a funny thing. So
Yes.
thank you so much, Heather. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone.
Mm.